This is Pam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Catherine Gairard. And you're a singer, harpist, composer, model, and artist. And I want to welcome you to the Pam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
Hello, thank you so much for having me here. Finally.
Well, it's always fun to talk to artists. We started our podcast back in 2016, talking to musicians. This is actually episode 1068 of the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast. We've been on the air since 2016 doing live podcasts. And want to let people know that we are also a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. So if you check out our coupon code at Ghost, you can check out that platform. It's an audio only platform. Again, we're a featured podcast. We'll be on that later tonight. If you use code Ghost, you can check that out for 30 days for free. And this episode will be on there later today. But I want to welcome you as a musician. Like I said, we started talking to emerging and independent singer-songwriters back in 2016. Since then, we've kind of increased our the types of people that we talk to. We've changed. We talk to therapists, we talk to CEOs, we talk to all types of people. But we've always wanted to talk to people who are creators, and artists are
Mhm.
creators. And because you're both a artist and a singer and a musician and a composer, so you're in that creative space that we like to talk to. And one of the first questions we always ask people is like, what motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
I feel so happy when I'm doing creative things. I feel like I was born for doing creative stuff like acting, dancing, making music, singing. I just need to create things all the time. So it makes me happy. It feels like the right thing to do for me. And there's no other explanation like a necessity for me to be doing those things. And I feel like I can bring happiness and positive energy to people by doing that. So,
I think it's interesting when people have that creative kind of spark, because what I find is that some people get really they don't understand how you can be a creative person because they don't have it. Like when you're talking to other creative people, we kind of get it. Like
mhm,
if you're a composer, or you're a musician, or you're an actor, and you hang around another creative person that's a photographer or a musician or a film director, we all have that spark. We all have this need to express ourselves. And if we deal with somebody that wants to talk about like sports or other, day to day kind of other things, but we're kind of in our head.
mhm.
We're in that space where we want to bring what's in and bring it out. And we also, I think we're also inspired by like the muse or the
Mhm,
universe, where a creative person can be in a flow state, right?
mhm.
And you can just come up with something, and somebody's, well, how's that happen? And it's
Yeah.
kind of hard to describe it, because you can just do it compared to
Mhm.
somebody that can't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I still feel like there's also a definition of creativity that is too narrow, and it's like you are only creative if you do something artistic,
Mhm.
but the reality is that everything is creation, and we are all creative in different ways. And for example, someone who creates a company or a business is a form of creativity. Or someone who invents new stuff, who works with new technologies and is
Yeah.
creating new ways of doing things, new softwares and machines. It's also a form of creativity. So that's why people sometimes feel they are not creative, because they just don't express themselves or that creativity in the artistic realm. Is That's just one way of manifestation of that. But it's important to be aware of how we are creative in other areas as well, because we are creating all the time and manifesting our reality all the time.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I expanded my podcast from just artists to
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs and
Mm-hmm.
therapists and people who create systems or people who create services. And they didn't initially get it. It's like, well, how could somebody that's so creative want to talk to me? I'm a CEO. And I
Mhm.
still thought it's the same spark where I write a song that you create your company. It's the
Mhm.
same type of energy that
Mhm.
you're picking into. You're just doing it a different way. And I think,
Mhm.
like you said, like all human beings have creativity. Every day
Mhm.
you figure out a way to do something that's uniquely your individual way of handling things.
Mhm.
And in that way, your mind is figuring out how
Mhm.
to like deal with your reality. And
Mhm.
some people just don't realize how creative they are and just getting through daily life. You're
Mhm.
using your mental agility to do that and your creative spark to kind of get through the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It's a matter of awareness. To not
Yes.
be going through life in autopilot mode, but really like
Yeah.
bring awareness to what you're doing, even the most simple thing.
It's interesting when you discover like that you have like the what we know as like the artistic kind of creativity that lends itself to like painting or music or theater. Like at what age did you realize that you wanted to get into art or music or singing? Was it really? I know your father was into creativity, so was it because of your father, or do you just naturally kind of wanted to do it?
I think it was something that I was feeling I was made of, like from the beginning. I remember having being four and telling my mom I wanted to become an actress and things like that. So it was always there. Like I always kind of knew that was like my dream to say.
So when you started, like it was like acting or the arts, when did you find a passion for like your voice and for an instrument? 'Cause I know
Mm,
you're like a harpist. Like, did you go through a lot of instruments before you picked the harp, or did were there other, what's the progression?
yeah, I always love to sing and I need to learn, and so voice has always been like my main instrument and the thing that I love doing the most. And then I my first instrument was the guitar, so I played a little bit of acoustic and electric guitar. Then I tried the violin, I tried the harp as well, and the piano. And today I just do the piano for getting more um, ability for controlling the MIDI controller because it's a keyboard as well.
Yeah, the
Uh,
songwriting tool. Yeah, the piano and the guitar are both like songwriter tools because you can
yeah,
write the chords, you can write the melodies, you can write the bass lines. Those two instruments allow you to kind of build the song.
exactly. And then I was between, okay, what instrument do I do next? And I chose the harp first because I can sing along while I play the harp. And later on, maybe I would like to do the violin again. But for now, I am sticking to the harp. And it's an amazing instrument because it sounds really beautiful. It's not very common,
Yeah,
and also it allows to sing at the same time, so that's important for me. So
that's
that's
interesting. You're one of the first person I've seen that plays that instrument that actually talks about singing while playing. So it
yeah.
seems like I think a lot of people are so into just playing it. I've never really seen somebody sing and play it. Maybe is that more common where you are?
mm, I think people normally there are some people who so there's already few people who play the harp compared to other more popular instruments like guitar or piano, and so even fewer will play and sing at the same time because it's like two separate skills. It's literally two separate instruments, and the harp is already quite challenging, so it's not that easy to
Yeah,
do both. So to me the best is to try to sing along at the same time you are learning to play the harp. So
um,
I I've been seriously playing for a year, and when I am learning like chords, for example, or a melody, I try to sing the melody at the same time. So I'm learning to sing with the harp along
Oh,
as playing, as learning to play it. So it kind of goes all together. And
yeah,
so yeah, so my some teachers of mine were surprised that I was already after a year only able to play obviously simple accompaniment and sing at the same time. For them it was crazy, and it's just I simply didn't put myself a limitation like, oh no, I cannot sing until I have this level or this time.
yeah,
I just do it now, however it is, and if I have to do a very simple accompaniment, like then I do it. But you practice that. It's like a skill. Like one thing is to sing, one thing
yeah,
is to play, and a whole other thing is to sing and play. You know.
yeah.
So.
I think it makes a lot of sense because a lot of times, like you could be so into your instrument, right? Like you think about like a lead guitar player that doesn't sing. They're
Mhm,
so concentrating on the leads that
mhm,
they can't even imagine that they would sing. There's somebody else in the band that does that because they're so focused on doing the intricate nature of the solos that they
mhm.
can't even possibly think that they could ever sing at the same time. And it's the
Yes.
same, yeah. So I mean, sometimes like keyboard players are not singers in some unless you're like an Elton John or Billy Joel. I mean, a lot of times you're just in the band playing the boards. You got tons of stacked boards, and you're concentrating on all the things that you're trying to play rather than
Mhm,
trying to sing. So
mhm,
the ability to be able to sing and play an instrument, but whether you're a drummer, guitar player, or piano player, I've always thought that that's really it's a really interesting thing because I think when you start to write the song, like you find a way for it to fit in with how you play your instrument,
mhm,
and and I think it kind of defines how you write your song because
mhm,
you've got this you have your own unique take on like how I'm going to play this instrument, and then you integrate your voice
mhm,
to work with it, and then that's the thing I love about singer songwriters
mhm,
because each singer songwriter has their own way that they handle that project. They handle that dilemma. They say, well, how am I going to fit my vocals into playing this instrument and feel comfortable? And
mhm.
you find a way to make that comfortable for you, so that
Yeah.
you can present that, right?
Yeah, and also each project will have its own demands, and then it's not the same to write with a guitar than with a piano or with a harp because each instrument has like a language, and that will define what type of music you will be creating. So yeah, for example, with the harp it has a very, especially the Celtic lever harp that I use.
Mm-hmm.
It is mostly diatonic, meaning that you only use notes that are between that scale, that key that you are using.
Diatonic scale, yes.
Yeah, so there's that. And so it gives like this medieval, ancient fantasy type of flavor to your music just because using that. It can have some drama as well. And if you use electric guitar, it's gonna be more upbeat
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah,
powerful, and so on and so on.
but it gives you that feel. Like every instrument has a feel, right? And you're saying you're in that diatonic scale. And sometimes what I try to explain to people because I'm a producer is like some instruments and some musical gear has limitations,
Hmm.
and sometimes those limitations are actually really cool for
Hmm.
creativity
Yeah.
because if something is limited, like I deal with the Moog, right? And the Moog is monophonic. It's not
Hmm.
duophonic. It's not polyphonic. You can only do
Hmm.
one note at a time. So
Hmm.
there's a certain limitation. It's not you can't play like full fingered chords like a
Hmm.
piano. It's not
Hmm.
fully polyphonic. So you have to deal with that limitation. It's kind of a lead instrument. And
Yeah.
so if you're using it for bass or for leads,
Hmm.
and at least of any mode. But that in itself is like okay, that's like a limitation of what I can do with this thing.
Yeah.
Like I can't use it like a Hammond organ. I can't use it like a piano. So I'm going to be kind of in this range, and there's a sweet spot like usually
Hmm.
sonically where it fits in the mix. So when you're
Hmm.
writing a song, there's a certain like amplitude that these things put out that kind of it's a certain way, kind of I don't know. You kind of understand what I'm saying. But certain instruments have a certain, like when you start to record them, they take up a certain bandwidth.
Hmm.
And if you try to lay other instruments on them, it might be overpowering. Like this one thing might be so powerful, they kind of cuts through the mix and say, well, I'm going to have to use it like this or dial it down, or it forces you to kind of construct your work
Yeah,
with
yeah.
certain
The
limitations, right?
the more instruments you have in your mix, the harder it is to balance everything. And yeah, it's very interesting as well, like all the mixing process, very, it's like a totally different step after actually composing the thing. And hopefully there are like guidelines that you can follow. For example, if you are using an orchestra, you can mix um, according to where the instruments are physically in an orchestra. So if you are in the center and you are in front of an orchestra, you will hear the violins in your left and the
Mm-hmm.
treble bass in your right, and then the brass is going to be far away in your right. But if it's cinematic, you will move those brass to the left a little bit. So
Yeah,
also the
placement.
genre. Yes, the different genres are very interesting to study, because it's not the same to mix jazz, for example, or big band. Like if
Yeah, yeah,
the drums are like very far behind, like you barely hear them. But if you do that in metal, it's not going to work. In metal, you really want that kick super.
yeah.
uh
Every style has its own. Yeah, they have their own kind of rules. Like there's like
yes.
these, and then and then you get people who want to break rules, right?
Mhm.
So you'll have people like they do cross genre. So like you go from bebop to fusion, and then suddenly break some jazz rules. It comes more like rock. So you
Mhm.
get like you start playing with things, and it's like, well, this isn't exactly classical, or this isn't exactly bebop, or this isn't cool jazz. This is mixing something else.
Mhm.
And I think it's really interesting when you see where an artist heads at, right? Like in terms of like you're trying to figure out where your harp's going to lay in the mix, right? And you're trying to figure out how your voice is going to lay in the mix, and then anything else you put down on it,
Mhm.
whether it's drums or horns or anything else you're going to lay into it, you got to kind of like you're not even an engineer yet, but you're writing the basic structure of your song
Mhm.
about what you want to do, and then the producer and engineer could come in and to give you recommendations, based
Yeah.
on what they want, but they might not have your vision, right? And so
Well,
if you have a vision, yeah, you might want to do something different.
yeah, it's that's why there's a premix that is advised to do that. So it's important, if you are a composer or a songwriter, that you know some basics on mixing, especially for creative aspects of mixing. For example, I have a song that starts with crazy laughters, and I mix that in a way that seems like they come from afar, and then at some point they end up all these crazy laughters like all on you, like super close and moving,
Hmm.
changing, panning like crazy, because it talks about madness, the song. So
Oh,
that's like a very creative thing that you have to do first. So in the premix, then if you send to an engineer, they know what you want, and so
what
their
you're trying to
work.
do, yeah.
Yes, and so their job is to enhance what you're doing, unless you are doing something that really doesn't work technically, and that
Hmm.
they'll have to tell you, okay, you wanted to do something here, but it's not really working technically, so this part we need to change, but the creative idea stays, right? Like, I won't change your crazy laughter because I understand that's a concept, but maybe this thing here is lacking low end frequency, so I'll need
Yeah,
to
so we can
raise
enhance
that.
it. Yeah,
Yes.
they can go through the board and they can add the preamps and they can add all the effects and they can make the choices like where it lays in the mix, where it lays, in terms of like how much bandwidth do you have. And I run into that because I'm like an analog guy. I like a lot of analog synths, and this is kind of a digital world.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't like the Moogs because they're
Mm-hmm.
very heavy. They're very organic, and they come in with a very big tone. And so they'll try to take them down. Like, well, my point is, like, if I'm using that Moog, I kind of want it to take up a lot of the mix.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not using the DX7. I'm not using a digital synth. I want it to take up a lot of the mix. I
Mm-hmm.
purposely am trying to do that. So if somebody comes back and tries to put it way down, I'm like, no, I don't want that.
Yeah, that's very difficult as well because like the best projects always have like entire teams because several heads think better than just one. And it's like years of experience. Like you can be a very experienced in composing, but you have an engineer with 30 years experience in mixing, and there's no way you're going to replace that. So you can use that in your favor, but especially when you're with a band, it's difficult to get everyone agree on something.
Yeah,
That's why it's important to have a leader, someone who takes the final decision. And sometimes that's the producer because they have a more objective view and also a broader view. Because the guitarist, for example, that happens a lot, will hear always his guitar is always too low for their taste, and they will always try to crank it up in volume and heard more. And so there's always this war between guitarist and singer and drummer to sound louder. And the producer has a broader view in the
yeah,
sense
what
that they
serves the
know,
song.
yeah, they know all the technical situations between the different frequencies and timbre and pitch, etc., that are happening that the musicians don't realize most of the time. So that's why it's necessary to have a producer, or it's better to have a producer if you can, because they give you that objective broader view. Like, yeah, I can do that, but then you have to take into account like there's like it's gonna change like at least 20 things in the chain. So it's not as easy to decide just take
Yeah,
the
where it's
volume
going to
up.
happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot of detail, and I guess the question also, like, if you're a singer songwriter, right, you're pretty much in charge of your vision, right? If you're writing a piece and you're not working with a band, like you're a one person project, and you might work with other people, but you've got a definite vision. So I guess when you're working, are you primarily the primary actor and doing what everything you're doing, or do you work with a band?
So I work solo. I don't have a band. I do everything. I started with a producer. And those first four songs that I wrote them. I wrote the lyrics and the melody, of course, and the harmonies, and then all the orchestration. Because back in the day, I didn't know how to do all this, so all the orchestration and mixing was done by a producer. So
Hmm.
it's easier for the producer when you are alone because it's just one person to convince, to explain things, to explain why to do that in this certain way or another. So it's easier to negotiate as well because then it's just this one vision. Exactly.
Yeah,
As also the producer, I have to convince of my vision. So we kind of get to an agreement on how to get that vision. And the producer's job is not to impose you a vision, is to how do I make this vision sellable? Because that's
yeah, yeah. That's the
the
point.
goal.
Yeah,
You want to sell that music, and you cannot be such an alien that no one understands what you're about.
yeah,
And and if you are like one of the, how you say, like one average, like cut how you like cut those cookies, that how you call that, that's
yeah. Kind of cookie cutter. You're doing the
yeah,
copy.
exactly. Exactly. So the producer's job is to try to help you find like your voice as an artist, your sound, your style. And in that sense, I benefited a lot from having a producer, because I felt that he was very experienced and he had experience with classical music as well as rock and pop, cinematic. So talking with him, like I at the time I was relying a lot on crazy metaphors and philosophic stuff to try to get him an idea of what I wanted. And so I would be there talking, and I bet in his head he was like, ah, okay, so cinematic, some Disney, this balance, this other balance, rock from X decade, these drums. So she likes this drum, so that is this library that I have here, etc. So like kind of translating everything into musical terms. And it's kind of the more beginner you are as an artist, the more abstract and ethereal is your language, and the more experience you gather, the more tangible and technical your language becomes. And it's not a bad thing, because the ethereal stuff will always be there, but you need a an efficient way to communicate that to others. You cannot be all your life wasting 2 hours of meeting to explain, oh, I
Yeah,
want I don't know, I want a low end, a strong low end in my piano, for example. Like you need to say it like, I need to reinforce the low end, like to have a very
yeah,
low, strong low base foundation. So very, it's not the same to say powerful bass. What does that mean? Maybe
yeah.
for
What does that
someone
mean? Yeah, yeah,
it has
yeah.
a
It's
very
like
round sound, super full with fingers, and for the other powerful bass is a more brighter sound, picked, for example, like with
yeah. It also
dizzy.
probably helps like if you can describe like an example of somebody
Yeah,
that has a sound. Like if you know that you like piano ballads and you like Elton John, you like Billy Joel, you've
yeah,
got a certain piano tone, and you tell the producer like, I like this song, The Stranger, and it has
mhm,
this tone. I want
yeah,
that tone on my piano.
yeah,
Or if I'm listening to the Who, I like what Keith Moon's kick drums sound like on this track. Do you
yeah.
know
For
how to
example,
get to that kick drum sound? Do you know how to get to that?
yeah,
You
for
could be
example,
more descriptive, right?
exactly. For example, in one of the songs that I have that has a piano, I wanted, like, all I could say was like, I want a piano like Moon Sonata by Beethoven. I say, I don't know, that Moonlight by Beethoven, because it has this low end that is very strong there. And but his interpretation was different, and I didn't feel like I had this low, powerful, dramatic piano that I was imagining, because I should
Hmm.
have said, I want to do the to I want you to build the piano that I want on the lower octaves. Very
Oh,
dramatic, very,
oh yeah, yeah. That's more
so
descriptive.
exactly. So the song, I love how it turned out, but I wasn't able to explain. I want this piano with a lot, like do octaves of the fundamental in the low end, in the lower octaves.
Yeah,
That's
or
not.
the lid height. Yeah, I want the lid height at a certain height, or I want
Mhm.
it closed. Like some people know, like they want the piano lid open, or they want it
Yeah,
at a certain height, or they want
yeah,
the actual tuning. Because you can actually tune the piano. And some
yeah,
people, if they really know what they want, it's like, well, I want you to tune or
hmm,
dampen the strings,
yeah,
or the difference between using like a German grand piano and a Steinway, or
hmm,
using a Yamaha piano. Like
yeah,
there's somebody wants that German grand piano because there's a certain tone that comes off of that versus
yeah,
the Steinway versus the Yamaha versus other types. And if you
yeah,
start to when you start to know the differences between your Fender guitar and your Gibson guitar and your Rickenbacker, and all the different instruments have different like tones and different
hmm,
timbres. And if you when you start to know, it's like if you were talking to a film director and
hmm,
you start saying, "Oh, I want this kind of light." If you don't know how to talk about the lighting
hmm,
to the lighting director, they will have no idea what you want. Like you say, I want this kind of like you got to tell them like in the term, like
yeah.
what it is.
Yeah, you don't need to be that. I mean, that's the more you know, the easier it is for the producer, because
Yeah, yeah,
it's less things they have to think about. If you say, I want the Yamaha sound that, if I remember correctly, like is very has like a lot of attack. I think it's like very,
yeah,
it's not soft. It's not soft. So you say that, they are, okay, I know what piano you want. Or, I want my piano to sound like, I want you to use emotional piano by Sound Iron. It's a very specific,
yeah.
very
Specific sound.
soft, very beautiful. Um, yeah. So this is it's just it's less things for them to think about, but still their job is to be able to translate you, because they have to deal with artists that have no idea of the technical side and are
Yeah.
very ethereal. And there's
Ethereal.
nothing wrong with that. It's just how you are, and they are like in a yeah, they are like that, and you have to know how to translate all those things. But obviously, if they find someone that is very tangible in their language, they just love them. It's, I don't need to be deciphering all this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's cool when you actually get on. It's like the idea of like frequency and vibration. Sometimes with people, you're like
Mm-hmm,
on the same frequency. So it's
mm-hmm,
like you think about it, like George Martin and the Beatles.
mm-hmm,
Like he was their producer and he got on the same frequency as McCartney and Lennon in terms
mm-hmm,
of, I heard this story where he was doing Peter Sellers comedy records. And
mm-hmm,
Peter Sellers comedy records had special effects, they had loops, they had multiple layered tracks. And rock
mm-hmm,
bands hadn't been doing that. Rock bands were just recording instrument to each track and not layering things. And
mm-hmm,
because George Martin had been doing these comedy records, they had all these layers. It started
mm-hmm,
to open the idea of using the studio as an instrument. So you
mm-hmm,
could have backward tape loops, you could run through effects, you could layer vocals, you could start to put instruments on top of each other. It's like a bass and then another bass, and a piano and another piano. And the idea of that type of layering kind of started happening with George Martin and the Beatles because they actually saw or heard in his Peter Sellers comedy records stuff that they wanted to introduce into the rock music. And so it was kind of going back and forth where they found an example and they got in tune where they
mm-hmm,
created all this great music that actually kind of created the rock album or the concept album or the progressive rock or the idea used in the studio as an instrument with tons of rock bands in the 60s and 70s took advantage of even today in our DAWs.
mm-hmm,
We kind of took advantage of the idea that you can have a sound painting,
mm-hmm.
that your song can be more than what you can play physically, that you could
Exactly.
do more than what you could do physically playing.
Yeah, and that's very important that you mention it, because then there's a particular aspect that we tend to forget, that we maybe see the producer as a mere technician, you know, but it also is actually in between being a technician and an artist. So some of them musicians themselves who compose things themselves. So you are dealing with someone who will want to leave their trace, let's say, onto your work. um, it's subjective. It's not a robot. They have a creativity as well, and therefore it's so important to find someone you are aligned with, you have the same taste and the same and similar research artistically.
Yeah.
Because if, for example, you want to do a trap record and you go to someone who is very much into heavy metal, um,
It's not
they
going to be
can do
aligned.
it. They
You
can
think,
do it, because producers tend to work with any genre and they know how to create each genre. But the experience is not going to be the same. Like, I don't
yeah,
know. I mean, they learn to do it, but there's a certain energy that it's not going to completely be there, you know. So
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
a
if you have a specialty, it's like if you're a classical artist or you're a jazz artist and you're in, bebop. I mean,
Mhm,
all you've done is bebop production,
mhm,
and then suddenly somebody wants to do fusion. Not that you probably couldn't figure it out, but
mhm,
everything you've done is pretty much bebop, and you can understand how fusion works. You could cross into it, but you
yeah.
probably want, if you're in the bebop zone, you probably don't want the guy who's doing fusion to be your producer because that's a different aesthetic. And unless you want to cross genre, if you
Mhm,
want, you probably want the person who's kind of like core in that genre to be like
mhm,
the trap king producer. Like you probably want them on your team if you
mhm,
want to get into trap or if you want to do like a big beat or new
mhm,
wave or like post punk. I'm really much into punk and I like kind of post punk, which
mhm.
is kind of like pre new wave. And there's a certain sound to that. And
Yeah.
you could have somebody that does electronica, but that's not the same as like a post punk new wave producer. It's not going to sound like a Duran Duran. It's not going to sound like Flock of Seagulls. It's not going to sound like that 80s new
Mhm,
wave because that new wave producer, that's what they do.
yeah. Well, I think if you want to experiment with fusioning different genres, it's important that you find a producer that it's also into that research of fusion mixing stuff, and because one they will have made different styles, so it's going to be easier for them to understand what you want and how to crisscross different elements to get you what you want. And also they will be more open-minded about what can and cannot be done. Someone that is too fundamentalist
Yeah, you
is
have a
not
hard
the
time.
right, yeah, is not the right fit for someone who wants to experiment with different elements of music and have like an eclectic approach to music. So
Yeah, like a
um
Brian Eno. A Brian Eno. You think about Brian Eno and Bowie.
mhm,
Brian Eno was like very famous for going on chalkboards and telling studio musicians just to randomly do a key or a chord out of
mhm,
sequence. And then people
mhm,
were like, why do that? Because I
mhm,
want you to, because I want to kind of, he used to radically do things, throw in new devices,
mhm,
and nobody really knew how to use it. And then
mhm,
kind of not read the manual. Like Bowie
mhm,
was famous for saying, like, he would come in and bring new stuff and not really fully understand it and kind of try to break it or
mhm,
not use it the way it was intended to be used.
mhm,
Very experimental type of production people. And
mhm,
Bowie was in the mind space that's what he wanted. If you
mhm,
know what that's where your head's at,
mhm,
then you kind of got to. I think as an artist, it's very important to you to like know like where you are at the moment you're doing your work. You have a good idea like where you are in your artist journey.
mhm. Yeah, I agree. It's a matter of also staying open to what the other person can give you, not being narrow minded. For example, I know that since I didn't know any better, I kind of wanted to sound very much like this or that band in terms of having like very strong electric guitar and very, super like how we understand metal.
Yeah,
And he took me more towards a cinematic kind of musical type of sound that is still powerful, that it still has the guitar, but put in a less
dramatic.
upfront way. Like it's a more treated with like elegance, let's say, like very melodic lines of
Mm,
guitar that are there like a counterpoint in between the rest, and it's not really um eating the rest of the instruments.
not as
And
heavy
so
metal, not that kind of heavy metal or like death metal kind of jarring like attack. Like if you get to more melodic, like harmonious,
yes.
cinematic or surrealistic, like soundtrack level guitar work that was maybe not less dissonant because a lot of times guitars can be very dissonant They can have a lot of power. They get a lot of feedback, a lot of overtones, a lot of
Mhm.
harmonics, and it kind of gets a little much. I mean, within heavy metal or metal, that's the point. Is you kind of overblow, blow out
Well,
the tube
that's the
amplifiers.
that's the tradition. That's what has been done always, right? So following that doesn't really innovate. And what I discovered is that since the guitar has all of those things that you mentioned, so rightfully, it takes up a lot of space, so much space, and it's hard to control, but it's easy to just fill up, and then you put some strings behind, and
Hmm.
maybe a flute, and many bands go away with it, like they say, oh, we are symphonic metal now, because there's some synth strings there and a flute somewhere, and piano, and but the basic thing is the same, and it's no much more effort in that sense. Like it doesn't innovate as much. It's not breaking any traditions, and actually I am in the and it's not bad. Like, I'm not saying people
No,
shouldn't
it's
do it.
everything's yeah. Everybody has their own feel.
It's just that the vision that my producer brought to me, and then my learnings afterwards on counterpoint, composing, orchestration, etc., made me realize there's so many other instruments that also sound so powerful, sometimes even more. Like, I'm thinking about the
Yeah,
brass
yeah,
section
yeah,
can give
that's very
so
powerful.
much, yeah, so much power, and can be so epic that just limiting yourself to the guitar.
Yeah, you're kind of not taking advantage of the whole palette.
Yeah,
Like a lot of times you
exactly.
think of like sound painting, and the
Hmm.
Hendrix used to talk about sound painting, and so did
Hmm.
the Beatles. The idea of when you sound paint, and sometimes you want to dial things down. Like if your guitar is too heavy, and then also what I found in music is the space between the notes, like the
Hmm.
silence, right? If
Hmm.
you have a piece of music and you allow it not to just be like overpowering and over layered. Like you build a song like the song construction is like, do you have an intro? Do you have
Hmm.
like a melody, maybe
Hmm.
a fill, a second bill, an outro? Like do you have timing changes? Do you have tempo changes? Do you have sections like a crescendo, a decrescendo, or silences where
Hmm.
certain things get brought out and
Hmm.
other things get emphasized or de-emphasized. If everything's just loud and just layered, there's no room to kind of
It's
actually
like,
write the song.
yeah, that happens a lot as well. It's a matter of the structure. I've heard songs in many styles, but now I'm thinking about some heavy metal songs that have a great orchestration, a lot of instruments, a lot of things going on, all very well balanced, and yet still sounds flat and boring. And I was thinking, why is that? It's not a bad song, but after a little while, I just grow tired of it. And then I realized the structure is everything. I am preparing some courses because I'm going to start a program called Momentum in April that is for learning to create movie soundtracks. And
Oh yeah, that's
and
good.
they were talking about three layers of music understanding, of what makes people be carried away by the things you write. And the first one, the most superficial one, is melody. Melody is very is like the closest thing, especially if it has lyrics to the audience, because it's like so everyone understands melody. It's something that you can sing. It sticks to your head, etc. And then you have the harmony, because depending on what harmony you put, you will give a totally different vibe to your melody. You can take, for example, if we take the Darth Vader theme, the melody is major scale, but the harmony in beneath is minor. So
Mm-hmm.
that gives
Kind of
you that,
rotating.
yeah, it gives you that. That's why this theme is so scary, because
Hmm.
it's it doesn't fit. It's like, why this melody in major scale is with minor chords, it's weird. So it gives you that unease sensation. um and then there's the third layer that is like the least evident for the listener, and that's structure. That's a matter of, it's called also the musical form. How this thing that you said, how you prepare for the biggest moment. For example, in How to Train Your Dragon, you have the main theme of the main characters, and throughout the presentation of of the story of all the characters, etc., you're having this main theme fragmented, and
Hmm.
it stops
Yeah.
in attention. And so it's preparing you to want, I want this to resolve, I want to listen to the whole
You
theme.
get
And
pieces of it, like little hints.
exactly. And then when they finally fly together for the first time, you are getting the presentation of the whole theme with brass and horns and everything super epic. And it's just like, oh, wow. And all of this has been thought in advance by the composer, John Powell. And he has prepared the whole structure first on how he's going to present that to enhance the most important moments of the movie. So that's translated to a song is your intro, your pre-chorus, chorus, verse, bridge, etc. How you're going to
Yeah.
bridge and how you are
This
going
seems like,
to.
yeah, I understand what you're saying because a lot of times today it seems like songs don't have those structures. Sometimes songs are so beat focused. It may be an 808 or a Lynn drum or a 929 or whatever. All these drum machines and they kind of stay on like one beat where they don't have a lot of variation, and you don't hear the bridge. You don't hear like the verse two structure is not that different. It might be using the same 808. It's like so there's no build up. If you go back to the older songs from
Mhm,
different, even to the 80s,
mhm,
you still have like structures. We see
mhm.
less structures because maybe they're not professional musicians that weren't the ones doing it. A lot of hip hop culture and sampling and people using the grid on the DAW.
I feel
And
it's because it demands thinking time, and sometimes you can't give it that thinking time, or some people are too lazy to give that, or they think they have to be releasing songs all the time to stay relevant on social media, and so they sacrifice on the quality sometimes without even noticing, and then they get burned out because that's not like the best strategy to grow, and they see little results and their music doesn't satisfy them. And so it's about creating systems as well, and be aware and learning as much as you can. It's just structure and contrast, how you create that contrast, and then you create your systems to get that and to experiment with different instruments each time. So there are ways to balance um, deadlines and consistency needs without compromising on the quality. So there's many different reasons why many songs, free marketing in some cases, and commercial demands, etc. There's many reasons. Inexperience, lack of knowledge, laziness, so many reasons why music is like that. But it's not all the music. It's also um, that, like, the listeners have to also actively search for the music that truly satisfies them, because I feel like in today's world it's not about, there's not like a equal playground where everything is thrown at you equally, and then what's truly good will stand out. There's many mediocre things being pushed to you
yeah,
through media, and I have a lot of resources to do that. And if you are lazy as a listener, you're gonna swallow whatever they want you to swallow. And it really feels like much of that music, co- truly completely commercial products, musical products, are made to really make you more silly.
Yeah.
um
Well,
so
there's one. It's fun. There's a interesting thing I was watching. It's Frank Zappa, the great musician, pointed out that in the 60s and the 70s, you had record executives that didn't really understand the musicians, right?
mhm,
But they said, like, I don't understand it, but I'll
mhm,
put it out because maybe somebody will. And then Frank Zappa said, today you've got these people that say they know what people want. They did all
mhm,
this market research, and then they don't allow the different types of music to come out. So, Frank Zappa was pointing out that in the 60s and 70s, you had very experimental musicians that broke through
mhm.
because, in his opinion, it was the record executives that didn't understand it, but said, well,
Mhm.
I'll just put it out and see what happens, versus
Yeah,
people who think they know what the audience wants and then keeps on giving them the same thing.
and
And he
also
was
they are,
lamenting that.
yeah, absolutely, and they are afraid of taking risks because they want to earn money, and that's all they think about. And like the contracts are already very, very unfair for the musicians already. But since the CD, the album doesn't make as much money anymore, they, because before, something that people need to know is that a label, really their work was to get the album, vinyls, CDs, whatever, created. And that was a huge chain of production that was very expensive. And so when that got sold, they would get a huge percentage because their expenses were also huge. We're talking
Yeah,
about
hi. Yeah,
the physical material, the people, the distribution, getting it to the physical stores. There was no internet to buy on the website, etc. So
yeah, it's all the
it was,
radio. The
yeah,
radio was the internet.
exactly. So it was justified. That 90% they will take was justified because they would really put in that money into the creation of that. But if you did merchandise, that was all for the artist. If you did, or at least they will have another company to do that.
Yeah,
And you know, if they did concerts, all
yeah, the
the earn,
money. Yeah,
yeah,
that's the money. Concerts.
all all the earnings from the concerts will go to the artist. But today, since the CD doesn't sell as much, they still wanting to keep the percentage as if there was all that production chain that doesn't is not there anymore.
Yeah, doesn't. Yeah,
Plus they want to take a part from your merchandise,
merch.
plus
Yeah,
a part from your concert, plus anything. And
yeah,
even
your mastering rights. Yeah, the mastering rights. So your
you
sync
never
licensing. Yeah, they
you
want
were
to take the sync
never
licensing.
you were never a owner of your master ever. The master is something different, and because they put the money up front, they are owners of your master. So if tomorrow, and that I think happen to Bruce Springsteen once, if tomorrow they decide they want to put your song because they own the master on an advertising of a product
Yeah,
you
they can do
don't
it. Yeah.
want to know, they can do it and you won't see anything from that. And also, I knew recently there was a label, apparently, there's a label in Italy that hire an agent to set up OnlyFans account for their artists, believe it or not.
Oh,
And so
geez.
and so I don't know if the artists want to do that or are forced by contract. I hope they do it if they want to do it, because that would be
Yeah,
like the ultimate
yeah, that's a
uh
really bad. That's
prohibition.
a abuse
But
of the
I
art.
I am thinking, like, if the label is asking you to do that, obviously they will want a share of your freaking OnlyFans earnings that have
Yeah,
nothing to do with the music. Is a brand thing if you want, a spicy brand thing if you like, but it's more about you. And so we've got to the point where a label has decided that they will open something that is very personal to do, for
yeah,
the
that's
art
crazy.
to get
I
money. See what I mean?
Yeah,
So
I think like a lot of times, like you got some bands have like decided, like I believe like Radiohead, Wilco. There's a lot of big bands like that I was into that like Pearl Jam. They went off label. They
yeah.
produced their own stuff. They own their master because it's like their thing. And a lot
Hmm.
of these bands started to do that because they started to realize
Mm.
that it would better to be indie. Like Pearl
Hmm.
Jam went indie and they made tons of money because they put out every concert they do, they put a CD out and they
Hmm.
produce it through their own
Yeah.
company. And they
Yeah.
own the merch and they own all the stuff. And Eddie Vedder was like really with the band. He's like, I want control because I know
Hmm.
what I want. And
Yeah.
so they got off the big labels. Now they're not big as they used to be, but they'll still fill a stadium if they
Yeah.
decide to play. So
Yeah.
sometimes you don't have to be as big as they say you need to be to actually still work. You know,
Today, today you don't need to be super famous worldwide and have millions of people knowing your name. If you do things right, you can have a community that it might be small, but these super fans that love you, love what you do, and are ready to support you in any way they can. So it goes more through this and adopting a close approach, like a proximity to the fans, and like being
yeah, they feel
personal.
like they feel like they put out fan newsletters. If you
Mhm,
have bands like like the example I heard, they put out like a magazine to their fans.
mhm.
They put newsletters out. They talk to
Yeah.
their fans through these newsletters. They send them low notes. They send them special Christmas albums to the people in the fan club. So when you
Mhm,
build a connection with your fans, I mean, you can be a smaller band. I know a lot of small indie bands. They do stuff
mhm,
like that. They'll put a Christmas record out. They'll put like a like birthday records. They do little micro things. They
mhm,
do micro level things that become like collector's items. And so they'll
mhm,
run a small amount of shirts or um, little USB drives, posters, little fanzines, or even postcards with pictures. And
mhm,
it's like they get into the process. They put out vinyl. They'll go set up a merch table. They'll sign the vinyl, and they don't run lots of thousands of hundreds of thousands of copies. There might be like a couple of thousand vinyls. That's a
mhm.
limited edition, and if they show up, they'll sign them. And they get most of the money because they put it up. And so
Mhm,
it's more like you control your destiny, you control your work, you control
mhm.
what's on the cover, you control where you're going to play. You don't have to like kill yourself because you're doing things the way you want, and you're not maybe on MTV worldwide known, but you're actually a sustainable band that doesn't have to be worrying about getting kicked off the label. You
Yeah,
could go
absolutely.
10, 15 years playing with a big fan base and not worry about getting kicked off the label.
Absolutely, yeah. And you have your royalties and your things that keep compounding, so it's possible. um Obviously the approach will be different if you became big thanks to a label and then went out, than if you're starting from scratch, and no one knows you. And of course the approach is going to be different, but it's still possible to do that, and to get at least big enough to create a living on based on your music and your things. But requires that you acquire skills that go away from just doing music, because you can do the best music in the world, if no one listens to it because you don't promote it, then
Yeah. You got
that's
to learn how to, take some business classes or at least take some foundational things of how do I get my song into sync licensing so I
Mhm.
can get it, so I can actually start earning from movies and indie films and commercials and there's a lot of ways to actually get into that. We've actually had some people on the show talk about how indie right artists can get into sync licensing, and it's really kind of foundational because you don't really make the money from the Spotify's. I mean, it's kind of like the radio. I mean, get the
No.
people to know about you, but you're never going to make it like a living. Even the big artists don't make the numbers from that anymore. They make it from other ways
Mhm.
with like merch deals.
Yeah, if Spotify has like streaming platforms, the bad side of them is that it has lowered the value of music so much because you can do infinite copies and listen infinite times. And yeah, some years ago you would do 0.004, I think, cents per play, and
Yeah,
now it's that, but you need 10 plays to do 0.004
yeah, they've
cents.
just totally devalued. It's kind of like when Napster happened. Like Napster happened first, and then you started getting away from vinyl, away from
Mm-hmm,
the CDs, away from the physical releases. The album format kind of went away for the playlist, and I think that to me was the big detrimental thing because I'm a child of the '70s and
mm-hmm,
I like to listen to albums because I think
mm-hmm,
albums represent an artist's vision. And one
mm-hmm,
song doesn't really do justice to an artist because you haven't really, it's like reading the cliff notes of an album. You don't, one song doesn't really tell you everything about that artist. I like to listen to albums
mm-hmm,
by a new artist because then I get to feel like who they are
mm-hmm,
and I get the full vision of what they're trying to do. But the
mm-hmm,
market today is not really album oriented.
mm-hmm,
You can still do it if you want to, but you have to
mm-hmm.
have a plan, like you said.
Yeah, it's true. Even in the NFT world, it's like but the NFT world really saves a lot of that value from music because you can create like a unique piece that is
Mhm.
registered on the blockchain as this is your original. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like I like to explain it like you have the Mona Lisa and then you have pictures of the Mona Lisa, and obviously your picture is worth zero because it's not the original. So an NFT kind of works in the same way. And
mhm.
yes, you can do a screenshot, obviously, but your screenshot is worth zero because the one that is registered as the original is the one that's on the blockchain with a number and an address and everything, and that's the NFT. So making it something unique like that, like and whoever has that in their wallet is like the owner, and
Of
that's
it,
where it's
yeah.
the value. So it kind of brings from the world of painting because paintings are safe from that devaluation because still
The
has the original.
original.
You
Yeah,
have
sure.
physical original thing, and so you bring that into the music world thanks to the NFTs, and you can create still a concept with the visuals and everything, and you can create a collection, etc. So it kind of rescues that in a digital
Yeah, that's
way.
the new age. Yeah, the new
Mhm,
age, like record collector compared to like I was sitting in the basement with my vinyls, my Led Zeppelin vinyls and my Pink Floyd vinyls. And now the modern kids on their iPad or their MacBook and they've got this NFT on their big screen and they're actually, and if you get an album, I was listening to like Earl Sweatshirt. He did like an NFT release
mhm,
for one of his records this year. And the
mhm,
whole album had NFTs with each song. And
mhm,
the people could go get them, and they're actually these like little video clips to go with each song
mhm,
that were like monetized through the NFT process, and then people got those unique ones. And there were certain NFTs that were not in the final album that went to Spotify. The
mhm,
album that went to Spotify doesn't have songs that the NFT version does.
mhm. Yeah,
So
exactly.
he went differentiated. So this NFT one has exclusive pieces and pieces of art that you don't see on the other album. So he kind of played
Exactly.
both sides.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. It's the sense of exclusivity of having something that no one else has. It's the same idea as the first 100 vinyls will be signed.
Hmm.
You are
Yeah.
having something, and that gives more value. Like if you want to sell a vinyl from like Taylor Swift did that, like with an album, and there were
Yeah,
a limited number of copies that would be signed. So today, if you want to sell that, I
on
think,
eBay it's a lot. Yeah, it's probably like
yeah,
thousands
like
of dollars.
yeah, exactly, because it's like the one that has been signed, and there's only a few of them, and then there's the same vinyl without the signature doesn't is not worth as much.
Yeah, I think that's how artists can kind of start getting back into the art. And I think it's really interesting when artists, I think the whole idea of music, a lot of times you end up working with that cover artist, or now you'll work with like an NFT animator or an NFT illustrator
Mm-hmm.
to kind of digitize some art or work with a graphic artist to that. And so it's like a project again, where we were in the world maybe this 3 or 4 years ago, it's like, everybody said, well, you don't need to care about album art because we don't have vinyl to present it. Like vinyl was like a really good way to present it because you had a bigger space.
Mm-hmm.
But now that this NFT is now suddenly like, well, that space could be as big as your screen, right? If it's an iPad screen or a big monitor, you can have now the art can go big again,
Mm-hmm.
and you can have all kinds of people doing things. That I think that the synergy between a graphic artist, a filmmaker, and an artist and an actors,
Mm-hmm.
I think it starts to bring back kind of what MTV did
Mm-hmm.
when you started having the visual with the art. I've always
Mm-hmm.
been a big fan of like when that integration happens between different disciplines in the arts, and I think that does, like you mentioned in NFTs, that does have potential to kind of save the
Mm-hmm.
music.
Yeah, in that sense, yes, it's value, and also it has another advantage is that wherever you go, wherever you travel, you have all of your whole collection with you, and you can listen to whatever anytime you want. Whereas with all those vinyls, like they are on your basement if you
Yeah,
travel,
yeah, travel with them.
and
So
it's
then
different.
this world with your smartphone and your iPad, have something like the NFT brings back a piece of that vinyl concept, or even
Mm-hmm.
more now, because you can be video, and the vinyl
Mm-hmm.
couldn't be video, and now you could have video, and it
Mm-hmm.
could, we could have NFT music videos. That
Mm-hmm.
we've kind of been playing with like certain level of how long they can be, but there's nothing, technology is exponential. So
Right.
eventually, you'll probably get full videos, full NFT music videos.
Yeah.
I would just think. Well, I'm in tech, but I would think that that's not impossible.
Yeah, it's totally possible. It's being done.
Well, I
Like
want
I've
to thank you. Yeah,
I've seen like simple animation videos. So there's movies, NFT movies as well, like short movies. So definitely videos are there.
yeah. I just think it's like amazing what Cause people could look at the glass half full, half empty. Could say that the golden age of singer songwriters is over, or the
Mm-hmm.
golden age of music is over. But I've always kind of hopeful because it can always happen. 'Cause I remember when I'm a child in the '70s. I remember when punk happened, and
Mm-hmm.
people had said music had gotten bloated and it was too much, and progressive rock was, Led Zeppelin's like that's not good anymore. And suddenly the Clash shows up, and the Ramones show up, and it brought a
Mm-hmm.
lot of energy. And you
Mm-hmm.
never know when something like that's going to happen. It's kind of like
Yeah.
when grunge happened, it happened again. So I think like, every time you think it's like there's no innovation, there's nothing cool happening, there's nothing authentic happening, then something
Yeah.
authentic suddenly happens.
There's always room for discovery and for innovation. It takes some rebellion to do that as well, to break with what has been done so far, um, and that's also that like that is needed, like to really experiment, like truly breaking the rules in every aspect.
Yeah, I just hope the kids today, the young people today, I think they're into it because I hear that a lot of people are not fully satisfied with what the industry's been giving them, and they're going
Hmm.
back and listening to older stuff and discovering,
Hmm.
some of the magic of that older stuff or the different things, like the
Hmm.
indie college radio type of vibe of finding bands that maybe aren't super popular but they're cool. And
Mhm.
you find out people like Sun Ra and
Mhm.
actually rediscovering whole artists that were kind of not known, but now suddenly known.
Mhm.
And it's like, whoa, I didn't even know this existed. Like Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground, some kid finding out about them, or finding out, about some type of like unknown band that they never heard of, and now suddenly, wow, I'm really into it. And
Mhm.
that kind of discovery can lead them to be excited and get
Yeah.
excited, not using music like background, but being very excited that they heard something they didn't hear from anyone else.
Mhm.
It makes them even want to be a musician or
Yeah.
want to be an artist. And that's always my hope is like that's why you should kind of strive to
Mhm.
be yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I want to thank you for being on the show. It always goes longer than we ever think, but it's been a great discussion. And we really talked about a lot about music, and we talked about your process and production. And I hope it's been valuable for people who are into that. And I think the creative space is just a cool place to be. And I want to thank you again for being a guest on the Family Like the Ghost podcast.
Thank you very much for having me and for your patience as well.
No, it's fine. I love to talk to artists, so like I was just waiting to finally get a chance to talk to you.
Thank you very much.